Well, here in chapter 4 of Micah, we're seeing a bit of a similar pattern we've seen in lots of other Old Testament books, where the pronouncements of judgment and the revealing of wickedness and challenges of the people happens. Then we usually get the chapter that says, but there's hope. That's this chapter, thankfully. So it's going to be more of a positive one than the last two we've seen. Verse 1, but in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it. Now, this is going to sound awfully familiar to you, especially for LDS people. This is one of the most often quoted scriptures about a temple in Isaiah is this one. Maybe Isaiah got it from Micah. Maybe Isaiah is quoting Micah. Maybe Micah was an earlier prophet. He said it first, and Isaiah is quoting Micah. That's a possibility. So this is interesting because in the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord is a temple. So a temple will be established in the top of the mountains. Now, the term for Utah is a Ute word for tops of the mountain. So in a way, you could say, chapter 4 says, in the last days, a temple will be built in Utah, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and the people shall flow unto it. We talked about this when we did this in Isaiah. Some interesting things for LDS philosophy in this section, dealing with temples, temple building in the mountaintops, and this idea of that everybody's going to flow to these temples. So verse 2, and many nations shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. So this is actually, like he says, this is probably Isaiah is quoting from Micah. Micah is most likely the originator of these verses, basically, which is really kind of cool. Now, verse 3, and he shall judge among many people and rebuke the strong nations afar off. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. So this is dealing with the second coming of Christ. The second coming, there's going to be lots of temples in the mountains. People will be flowing to those temples to say, we want to learn from the God of Israel. We understand the truth. We join the church, those kinds of ideas. And then he's going to come. And that's he will judge among his people and rebuke the nations far off. This is Christ. The people will realize we don't want war anymore. So they're going to take their weapons of war and turn them into things that can help with agriculture and production. That's verse 3, basically. Now verse 4, but they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. For the mouth of the Lord of hosts hath spoken it. So there's no war, there's no fighting, there's none of these things going on. And so people will have peace. They'll be able to enjoy the shade of their own trees because they don't have to worry about an invading army coming after them or anything like that. Verse 5, for all people will walk everyone in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever. Now, this is an important one to think about when it comes to last days prophecy. Just because Christ comes doesn't mean everybody suddenly chooses to follow Christ's ideas or suddenly converts to Christianity or something. People will walk in the name of their own gods. They will still believe their traditions are true. And here's the thing we have to think about. Just because they don't believe in Christianity doesn't mean they're wrong necessarily on everything. So we have to be careful about that. But there will be people with other religions during the time of the millennium, basically is what that is talking about. Verse 6, in that day, saith the Lord, will I assemble her that halteth, and I will gather her that is driven out, and her that I have afflicted. Who is this? This is the bride. This is the coming together. The bringing the covenant, marriage covenants that Isaiah talks about back together, basically. Verse 7, I will make her that halted a remnant, and her that was cast far off a strong nation, and the Lord shall reign over them in Mount Zion from henceforth even forever. So Jerusalem will be built up. There'll be the New Jerusalem, the Old Jerusalem will be built up and be amazing places. Verse 8, and thou, O tower of the flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, unto thee shall it come, even the first dominion. The kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. So this is the city of Jerusalem, the temple, reign will come there. Basically, it's the first dominion where Christ was first, the city built up to worship God idea, basically. Verse 9, now, why dost thou cry aloud? Is there no king in thee? Is thy counselor perished? For pangs have taken thee as a woman in travail. Now, in the Old Testament study guide, it had a comment on this. It said, Micah used the figure of travail or childbirth to illustrate that Judah would bring upon herself the pain out of which would eventually come a new life in the Lord. So this is a new birth, new beginning. Shortly she would be driven from her city and find herself captive of Babylon. This prophecy is amazing because Assyria was mistress of the world in Micah's day, Babylon being only a province of Assyria. This part of Micah's vision projected nearly 130 years into the future, but time is nothing to a prophet. Then, looking several millennia into the future, Micah saw Israel return in the strength of God. Using the symbol of horns like iron and hooves like brass, he predicted that Israel would trample her enemies as easily as an ox threshes grain. This passage has great significance for Latter-day Saints because Jesus referred to it when he visited the Nephites. After speaking of the gathering of Israel in the latter days, Jesus used Micah's prophecy to depict the kind of destruction that awaited the Gentiles of that period if they did not repent. That's 3 Nephi chapter 20. So some interesting symbolism and ideas that are pulling together with this. Let's continue on, in fact, with this metaphor of a woman giving birth. Verse 10, be in pain and labor to bring forth, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in travail, for now shalt thou go forth out of the city, and thou shalt dwell in the field, and thou shalt go even to Babylon. There shalt thou be delivered. There the Lord shall redeem thee from the hand of thine enemies. So the problems they face in Babylon, literally in Babylon and in Babylon as meaning the world, will help them change and come to God again. So that's that same metaphor we've seen through the rest of the book of Micah. We saw this in Jeremiah and Ezekiel as well, that they are, while they're being punished, through this punishment, they will be changed and be able to seek God, basically do more with God. So sometimes through our pains and problems, God saves us. The challenges aren't punishments as much as they are a way to help us change, get us out of our state of thinking so we can make good changes and improve ourselves. So a good life lesson for us to think about. So verse 11, now also many nations are gathered against thee that say, let her be defiled, let our eye look upon Zion. But they know not the thoughts of the Lord, neither understand they his counsel. For he shall gather them as the sheaves into the floor. So realize it's all part of the plan. They want to say, oh, God, they want to think that it's all about them, God helping them. And it's like, nope, this is all a greater plan to help you come back, basically. So verse 13, arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I will make thine horn iron. I will make thy hoofs brass. Thou shalt beat in pieces many people, and I will consecrate their grain unto the Lord, and their substance unto the Lord of the whole earth. So, and this is interesting because, again, this is what Jesus quotes in 3 Nephi in the Book of Mormon. Stronger power and an unstoppable force to gather the wheat and eliminate the chaff is basically what this is. This is, you will have power to gather the righteous together that won't be taken from you. You'll be able to make changes to things, and people that stand in your way, you'll get out of your way as you bring the gospel forth to other people. Now, this is a similar idea. Joseph Smith had a famous quote, no unhallowed hand can stop the work from progressing. Anybody who's been an LDS missionary will remember that quote. That's kind of the same idea, basically, is no one's going to stop the progression of the gospel of Jesus Christ. His gospel will spread to help people to have that opportunity to learn, to make the choice, do I want to follow God or not? And then once those decisions have been made, things will eventually wrap up for us. And they wrap up for us, in essence, when we die. If we had our chance and we didn't take it, we lost it. For those who didn't get a chance, they'll get it in the next life, which is why baptisms for the dead, those proxy ordinance work, still happens as well. That's even talked about in the New Testament. So there is hope. Always, always, always remember in your life, you are never too far gone. Never. Even Jonah in the well in the last book is at the bottom of the sea pleading for his life, the lowest point any human has ever been and lived at that time. And God heard his prayers and saved him. There is always, always, always hope for you. Always remember that. God is there for you, wants to help you. Very important to remember. So let's jump over to our next chapter as we continue in the book of Micah.